Mr. Chairman, thank you kindly. Most Americans support government regulation across a whole wide range of industries and social activities on everything from auto safety to food and drug inspections to alcohol and tobacco advertising to mine safety and occupational safety and health rules. But the public sees the process of crafting regulations as opaque and inscrutable, and often it is, which is why regulated industries and their well-paid lobbyists have so often been able to capture the regulatory bodies that are supposed to be regulating them. The truth is that regulations have a profound effect on every aspect of our daily lives. Regulations affect the quality of the air we breathe, the safety of the food that we eat, and the quality of the water that we drink. Regulations keep us safe at work and protect us against hazardous chemicals and asthma-causing air pollution. They influence the ways we travel and how we bank. They help us ensure that the products that we buy are safe for our children. Now, some politicians like to say that they're anti-regulation, but of course they're pro-regulation when it comes to restricting our personal rights and our freedoms. Take a look at what's happening in Republican-controlled legislatures and local governments across America. Republicans in states like Florida, South Carolina, and Missouri are using government to regulate what kinds of health care Americans can access, what kinds of books we can read, which bathrooms we can use, the ways in which people vote, and what students learn in school about slavery and American history, Jim Crow, and racism. Republicans are vehemently pro-regulation when it comes to advancing an ideological agenda that is theirs. It's true that the corporate-dominated GOP today does not support railway safety regulation, anti-pollution rules, and occupational and mine safety rules, but the modern regulatory state was actually created on a bipartisan basis. The key difference between the parties today is the Democrats believe that government regulation must be used to serve the public interest of everyone, the common good of all. Republicans want corporate CEOs and industry lobbyists to take over the regulatory process and write the rules that serve their own interests. And the GOP wants to use regulation to control women's bodies, to screen the books that we read, and to take over our school curriculums. Former President Trump used his rulemaking authority to deregulate industry for his business buddies, to divide the public, to roll back more than 100 critical environmental protections, and to advance regulations to restrict women's access to health care, to weaken anti-discrimination rules, and to undermine protections for students with federal loans, to name just a few of his agendas. He also handed the regulatory process directly over to corporate special interests, essentially allowing corporations to run the agencies that should have been promoting public health and safety and protecting the environment. In contrast, the Biden administration is using evidence-based, common-sense regulations to protect American freedom and to ensure that corporate interests will act in the public good. The so-called regulatory burdens that our colleagues assail are rules in the public interest. They include rules to protect Americans against financially ruinous surprise medical bills and junk fees like exorbitant credit card late fees or check bouncing fees. A rule to make it easier for people to get hearing aids over the counter. A rule to ensure drinking water does not include chemicals that are carcinogenic. And a fuel efficiency rule projected to provide net benefits of up to $1.6 trillion by 2055, including by improving public health and reducing climate change. The American people must pay attention to the methods by which we create our rules. These methods, which are contained in the federal rulemaking process, had not been updated in decades, but in April, President Biden issued an executive order to modernize them, strengthening democracy by further advancing the transparency, the inclusivity, and the effectiveness of federal regulations. President Biden's regulatory modernization plans promote efficiency and fairness. Well-funded corporations should no longer have outsized influence on federal rulemaking simply because they have the time and resources to bombard federal officials. The Biden changes require federal officials to proactively seek out the voices of those who are underrepresented in but still critically affected by the rulemaking process, including people with disabilities and people living in rural areas. President Biden's regulatory modernization plans incorporate the interests of future generations. Up to this point, agency cost-benefit analyses undervalued the benefits of regulations for our children and our grandchildren. The proposed changes should have bipartisan support. They use the same formula used by the George W. Bush administration to ensure that future generations receive the consideration they deserve. President Biden's modernization plans will allow us to better tackle national problems. In 1981, the threshold for qualifying a rule is significant, was set in an annual impact of $100 million. However, the threshold was never raised to adjust for inflation in more than 40 years. The new threshold of $200 million allows officials to focus scarce resources on timely review of the most significant and substantiated rules. President Biden's regulatory modernization plans will better measure Americans' actual lived experiences. The proposed changes reflect the reality that the costs and benefits of a regulation affect different groups of people and communities with different degrees of intensity. Corporate interests that prioritize short-term profits over long-term public safety and welfare will likely oppose these changes in regulatory protections because they have a financial interest in the status quo. But Democrats are committed to ensuring that everyone is fairly represented and considered in the rulemaking process. Regulations are a legal tool in democracy to serve the public good. Republicans want to dismantle certain government regulations or red tape to allow corporations and industry to regulate themselves, even when the public health and safety and our environmental security are on the line. Democrats are committed to ensuring that government protects and benefits the health and safety of all the American people while preserving the individual liberties and rights of the people. I yield back to you, Mr. Chairman.